You're listening to the Paranormal Peeps on the Darkcast Network. Come to the dark side of indie podcasts with the Darkcast Network.
We have cookies. Between the realm of the dead and the journeys of the living, join Josh, Jamie, and Elisa as they delve into the vast world of the paranormal and breathe life back into the history of the departed.
The Missing Magnolias podcast tells the stories of the missing and murdered.
Ultimately, these kids went into state custody and they never came out.
Together with missing persons expert Dr. Michelle Shawnees, we uncover the real true crime experience.
Every time we do another interview, I'm like, how do we find so many badass women?
We hear from victims who turn their pain into something positive.
We didn't find out till we were 11 or 12 years old that our mom was murdered.
In Times Square, it said Mickey Shunick fought for her life.
And experts who think outside the box to solve cases.
I scour missing persons databases like NamUs to see if they're uploaded to that database.
Subscribe to Missing Magnolias on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts today.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Paranormal Peeps podcast. I'm Josh, your single host today. Jamie and Elisa are not available, but we do have a special guest today, all the way from Canada. We have Brenda with Horrifying History.
Well, hello.
How are you doing today?
Not bad. Weather's nice. Not shoveling snow. The life is perfect.
Any day there's no snow shoveling has got to be a good day.
I agree. I hate snow. I hate everything about snow. I noticed that it's pretty in pictures, but it's very heavy.
Yes, it is. In fact, I was talking with a colleague and we were talking about the number of deaths that occur every year just from shoveling snow.
Yep. Heart attacks.
Yeah.
I used to work in a hospital, frontline healthcare, and every time that there was a snowstorm that, put more than just an inch or two on the ground, we always prepared because we knew exactly what we would get. Motor vehicle accidents, slip and falls, and heart attacks. And we would be, every emergency room always would be full with just that.
That's pretty typical. I grew up in North Dakota, which is we're about 80 miles from Canada. We had the same stuff going on.
Yep. Snow is not light.
No, it is not. But we're not here to talk about snow. We are here to talk about ghosts. And we are going to talk about, I would say, probably one of the most famous Canadian ghost stories, at least from my southern, south of the border recollection. We're going to talk about the Black Donnellys.
Yes. And I think that's why I love the Donnelly story so much. Like there's so many tales out there about a haunted place. And let's be honest, I tell a lot of them on the show. But these tales, for the most part, have always take a legendary status. And with that comes exaggeration through the years for many different reasons. Like sometimes it's exaggerated to bring in tourists. Sometimes it's used to demonize the actions that occurred. Or, sometimes it just morphs just because. But the thing is about the Black Donnellys is none of this actually applies. The tale that you guys are going to hear today is told how it happened. It's not exaggerated, but it is literally a case of extreme hatred targeted towards a family, corruption at its highest levels, and a community that had the taste for blood. And it's not exaggerated, and which I get a kick out of because everybody thinks us here in Canada are nice. Well, not necessarily.
But this was in the 1800s. So, this was a while ago.
True. But everybody has this image that everyone in Canada just says and apologizes a lot. As much as that may be true, we're not all nice today or in history. There's a lot of bad stuff that happened here too. And in this situation, it created some ghosts.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Honestly, like the truth in this case is more sensational and more entertaining than like you could make up. Right.
And that's why I love this story. And also it's now become such a part of Canadiana. There's like books about it, songs, and they even, had TV shows based upon it. That is how I guess extraordinary this story is.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I got looking into it, and the first thing that like really popped out to me is that it's an Irish immigrant community and family. And my thought is I thought the Irish immigrated to New York.
No, they came here too. Actually, that is why if you ever do a genealogy of somebody who was born and raised in the province of Quebec, you can pretty well expect, obviously, some French Canadian DNA in you, but it's very highly likely that you will have Irish DNA because during the potato famine, a lot of the children who were orphaned were adopted by people in Quebec.
Oh, wow.
And that's what when I had mine done, I was surprised to find out because on my mom's side, she's French Canadian. And I expected to see that DNA. Of course, you're going to see it. But then came the Irish and I'm like, oh, I guess somebody was adopted.
Yeah.
Surprise. But the funny thing is that I got a kick out of is I have more Irish DNA than my mom.
Oh, wow.
So because as much as here's how I thought it worked. They say you get your DNA from your mom and you get your DNA from your dad and you just presume it's 50-50. That's not how it works. So I actually pulled a majority of my DNA from my father's side and I pulled some portions from my mother, including the Irish, but I actually took more of the Irish DNA. But the funny thing is I just had to say to her, I said, so technically I'm more my father's daughter than my mother's daughter. Okay, that's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how we kind of think of DNA is that it's a 50-50 match, but
not necessarily.
Yeah.
And the one thing I loved about it is my mom decided to get hers done to make sure it was her side that Irish DNA came from. And so what did my mom do? She gets her DNA done. The day that it gets processed, you get an email, right? And it says, okay, you're done. And then you can look at your links and all this stuff. The day hers was done, I also got an email and it said that this person is your mother. And I'm like, that's nice to know. I presume so my entire life. So my mom phones and she said, Brenda, did you know that you're my daughter? Apparently it's official now.
Could you imagine if it didn't come back that way? Oh my goodness.
And I was reading a story recently. This week. There was a girl here in Canada, here in Ontario. She got her DNA done because her mother, in a fight when she was 16, said that your father's not your father. And then she tried to backslide and all this stuff. The daughter tried to get more information. Mom isn't talking. So she decides to do her DNA. And guess what she discovered?
It was true.
And her best friend was her half sister. Her best friend of 20 years. They met at work. And everybody said, you guys look alike, you act alike, this and that. And they just hung out every day, all day sort of thing. And to find out her best friend was her half sister.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, both of them were ecstatic, actually.
I mean, it's cool, but it's also like, that brings some new light into things.
That does, doesn't it?
Yes,
well, you've heard the story about Woody Harrelson and and the DNA with him.
I have not.
Well, you know who his best friend is? Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, yeah.
So the short story is they found out a few years ago because they're very close. Woody Harrelson was basically at Matthew McConaughey's house and his mother was there. Basically, she admitted at that point she slept with Woody Harrelson's dad.
Oh, no.
And it was very soon afterwards she was pregnant. So there is a very strong possibility they're siblings. Woody wants to do a DNA test. Matthew McConaughey doesn't want to do it yet. And he's like, we felt like brothers. I guess we could be.
Wow.
But look into Woody Harrelson's dad. He was a character. That guy, he was actually a gun for hire. And he ended up in jail because he killed a federal judge.
Oh, geez. You have to look that up.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. His dad was a piece of work and he was very available, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So Woody Harrelson basically said, I'm pretty sure I got a lot of siblings out there. But who would expect it would be Matthew McConaughey?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So speaking of bad characters, let's get into the Donnelly family.
Oh, well, this tale actually starts back in Ireland, as we were talking about Ireland. And it's a couple that met in Ireland and fell in love. And their names were James and Joanna Donnelly. Now, they actually I don't know how much research you went into their history, but they actually just had a very short courtship. And they got married in 1840 back in Ireland. And after they had their first son, who they named John Jr., the family immigrated over to Canada. Now, after they settled in, they hoped to establish a homestead for themselves and their son and their now 7 kids that were all born in Canada. And they decided to go and land in a township called Biddulph near London, Ontario. Now, here's the thing about these communities back then. Now, like many of the communities in Ontario during the 19th century, this community dealt with constant crime. And it ranged from, robbery and assaults to murder. bringing anyone to justice back then, it was not easy since the majority of the constables were untrained and often were the criminals doing the crimes. So for other reasons, the courts at that time were not handing out punishments what people thought were reasonable, which, everybody still says the same thing today.
Right.
So that kind of built up some of the tensions in this place. Now, when they moved to the area, the Donnellys actually decided to settle on a piece of land that didn't belong to James legally, and they became squatters. So this land was actually owned by a company called the Canada Company. I know, original name.
Exactly.
And they leased it to a guy named James Grace. Now, it's actually unknown if James knew if that land was owned by anybody else or if there were squatters on it, because what a lot of people don't realize is squatting at this time was common frontier practice, and it was supported by the courts underneath common law property rights. So therefore, being a squatter wasn't it wasn't illegal, right?
We called it homesteading in the States.
Right. So by the time we hit 1856, James Gray sold that land to a guy named Patrick Farrell. And when Patrick immigrated from Ireland, he went over to the property to take possession. And surprise, there's the Donnelly family squatting there, buildings, having a farm. He was shocked because he had no idea that there was people there. So he decided to go to court. And he went to court against the Donnellys in 1857, trying to evict the Donnellys off the land. But the disputants actually came to an agreement. So James was going to keep and reside 50 acres of the land, which was far less than the Donnellys actually cleared over the 10 years he was on it, occupying it. And even though this agreement was made in public and in court, Farrell wasn't happy with it. He would just continuously vocally attack any of the Donnellys in public. So in June 27th, 1857, Farrell attacked James at a public event with a handspike. Do you know what a handspike is?
I don't. I mean, I have some ideas, but
it was used at as almost like a tool. It was like basically a very big spike, and they used them in railroading.
Oh, okay.
So when I get to this point of the story, here's what I envision. Apparently in Canada, we just have piles of spikes lying around that somebody can just grab one of these and attack him in a public space with it. But then Donnelly, he grabbed another handspike and threw it at him in self-defense, and he ended up killing Farrell. I'm just saying, for the record, we don't have these things lying around. So
there's not a big pile on every street corner, just kind of
right.
hanging out.
It's like, I'm mad at my neighbor, just walk down the corner, pick up a handspike and throw it at him. No, that's not how it works here. But James actually did kill him. And even though it was self-defense, that wasn't really a thing back then. And he was sentenced to hang in 1859. But Joanna decided to intervene, and she submitted a petition for clemency. And when that happened, James had his sentence reduced to 7 years in Kingston Penitentiary in Kingston, Ontario. Now, just to give you an idea about Kingston Pen, I actually did a tour of this place because now it's a museum.
Yeah.
Spending 7 years here was not good. It's almost like, Alcatraz in the States. Not a good place to go. Yeesh. So, but again, remember how people were getting what they considered sentences that were not appropriate.
Right.
Well, from James not hanging, and now his sentence was reduced to 7 years, a lot of people in the community thought he got away with murder.
Right.
Now, meanwhile, in 1873, the Donnelly stagecoach line was started by James's son, William, and this thing was massively successful. So he decided to manage the company with his brothers, Michael, John, and Thomas. And this company started to rival the official stagecoach line that had been in place since 1838. So soon the competition fell to pressure, and they sold their company to a guy named Patrick Flanagan, who he was just determined to drive the Donnellys out of business. And he had a little bias. He was from the community. So this started a feud. And it was between the Donnelly stagecoach and the Flanagan and Crawley stage. Now, these guys, okay, I think they took it a little far. They didn't throw handspikes at each other, but what they did, they would, property was smashed or burned, horses were beaten and killed, stables were burnt to the ground, and all the community, even though it was both parties were guilty of this behavior. They blame most of it on the Donnellys because of the history with James.
Right.
And they nicknamed them the Black Donnellys, with the black being representative of them being evil. And this is when tensions just started to build, because I'm not saying the Donnellys didn't do some bad stuff, but they also, because everybody was mad at them, they were charged with a lot of things that either didn't stick or were that's not true. So some of the things, just to give you an idea, they were charged with assault, arson, trespassing, verbal assault, attempted murder, theft, robbery, and assaulting a police officer. But in all of these charges, the Donnellys were found not guilty in a court of law. And this just made the community hate them more.
Right, because they think the courts are against them or in bed with them in that avenue. So
exactly.
Yeah. And one of the instances I read about the Stagecoach feud was the Flanagan line. Their axle broke on a bridge, dumping the carriage and its occupants into the river. And that was blamed on the Donnellys. Now, with all of this stuff going on, there's probably a good chance it was.
Right. And that's the thing. None of the parties here are innocent.
No.
No. It's not just one side versus another. It's just bad behavior as a whole.
Yeah.
And so things, of course, gets worse when you put the church involved. And in June of 1874, Father John Conley created what he called the Peace Society in the county after he started to preach to his parish about all the bad stuff that was happening there and his thoughts on who was responsible.
Oh,
now,
geez.
That is not what you should be doing in church, pointing fingers at people.
No.
But, of course, that's what Father John was doing. And he asked everybody to pledge support by having their homes searched for the stolen property. Now, out of this group, another group formed, and they called themselves the Vigilance Committee. And evidence shows that both members of both of these entities were responsible for many of the crimes in the area. Now, the Donnellys chose not to sign this pledge at all. And I can't really blame them because they feared that the community, who hated them, would just use this opportunity to hide stolen property on their land and set them up.
Right.
Chances are pretty good that would have happened.
Right.
Now, James himself made this worse. He's out of prison at this time. He's now home with Joanna. And apparently he stood up in a church service that Father John was doing. And he denounced the priest at his own church service because he was starting to preach hatred to the Protestants during his services. And the Donnellys' friends, a lot of them were Protestant. Now, James also kind of made them angry because he started donating money to build an Anglican church, which further outraged them.
Which I say is
I get
strange.
what he was trying to do.
Yeah, which is strange because they're Irish Catholic.
Correct. And I can see both sides of it because, again, why are you giving money to somebody else if we are Catholics, Irish Catholics?
Yep.
But also he had friends of all different religions and he believed in helping them out. And I think a lot of this, too, is just kind of like a little stick in the side to Father John. I think that was a big motivator to him. It says they weren't getting along very well and he set up the Peace Society. So I think that there a little bit of the Donnellys were doing that as a kind of a, flipping the bird to him, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure. Like, it's, yeah, if you're in there and, you have friends and they're starting to preach against your friends, you're going to stand up for it.
Yeah, and I would too.
Yeah.
But I also think that he also wanted to, piss off a couple people too.
Yeah, there's got to be like, if everyone feels like if you feel like everybody's against you, you're going to fight back and you're going to fight back in different ways and just kind of like rub your nose in everybody's face.
Well, hatred breeds hatred, right?
Exactly.
And I think they've had a lot of bad come their way. And I think they acted and turned back. Now, all this anger that was built up in this community boiled over on February 3rd, 1880, which was the date that the Peace Society decided to take action. So their original plan was to visit the Donnelly family home late at night, handcuff the male members of the household, and then hang them from a tree by the neck until they confessed to all their crimes with the intent to hurt the Donnellys. Now, let's just go through this. Firstly, how you can confess if you're hanging from a tree by the neck?
Not well. You got to
be challenging.
Yeah, gonna be pretty challenging to speak with your larynx being crushed.
Also, on top of it, no one hangs somebody from a tree by the neck with the intent to hurt them.
Right?
Just to hurt them a little bit. No, yeah. I'm sorry. I don't have buy-in on that. So the Peace Society at this point, they decided to set up surveillance on the property to try to determine who would be home when and how to enter the property without being detected. So on February 2nd, James and his son went to town to pick up a relative, Johnny O'Connor. Now, Johnny was going to stay at the farm overnight to look after the farm while they were gone dealing with the latest round of charges in court. So about 1 a.m. on February 3rd, the Peace Society, they started getting together and drinking to gain their courage before they mounted their attack. When they got enough liquor in their system to feel empowered, they all walked over to the Donnelly home and started to surround the perimeter of the property. So Constable James Carroll, he then entered the home when he thought everyone was asleep, and he handcuffed Joanna and James's son, Tom, who was actually sleeping. So after the handcuffing, Constable Carroll woke up Tom and told him he was under arrest. And Joanna and their niece Bridget, who was visiting from Ireland, heard this. So just to give you a little background on Bridget, Joanna and her husband were getting a little older at this point, and they had grown children, and they were having a hard time with the farm already. So they actually asked, and they paid for the passage of Bridget to come over and to visit for a while and to come help out in the house and the farm with them and to see if this is what she wanted to do and settle there. Yeah. So that is why she was there that night. Now, all this commotion obviously woke up John, too, who went out and seen Carroll in his house, and he asked him, "What are the charges? Why are you arresting my son?" Tom then said he wanted him to read the arrest warrant, and well, since none of this existed, this is when the constable gave the signal to the Peace Society to storm the house with their literal clubs and pitchforks. So at this point, the vigilantes started beating John, Joanna, and Tom. Now, Bridget, she ran upstairs and went to hide as a way to try to save herself. Johnny also hid. He was underneath John Donnelly's bed. And since the men, their surveillance obviously sucked because they didn't know he was on the property. They didn't go looking for him. Now, John, they just jumped on the men first, right? Because they got to go take out the people who they thought they had more power.
Right.
So they just beat him repeatedly in the skull until he died. Joanna, she was fighting against her attackers, but she was eventually beaten and killed by the constable himself, Constable Carroll.
Jeez.
Tom, he was able to break free from his attackers. He started running towards the front door, but as he was running, he was stabbed multiple times with one of those pitchforks. When he fell to the ground, they decided to carry him into the kitchen where the bodies of his parents now lay, and they removed the handcuffs. When they did this, the vigilantes decided to hit Tom in the head just a couple more times to make sure that he was dead. They then went and moved upstairs and found Bridget where she was hiding and beat her to death. So they carried this body downstairs and left her with the rest of the family. Now, meanwhile, when all this was going on, one of the men found the family dog who was barking, and they decapitated the dog and threw that body with the rest right by the kitchen.
What did the dog do?
Jeez. He barked. See, if there's a ghost haunting those guys, I hope it's the dog.
Right? Jeez.
So what these guys decided to do is they realized that John Jr. wasn't here. He wasn't at the house. So on the fly, these guys decided that they were just going to rid the community of the entire Donnelly family that night. So they lit the house on fire with the bodies inside, and they went hunting for John Jr. Now, after these guys left the property, when the building was on fire, Johnny was able to escape from underneath the bed and got out of the burning home and went out looking for help. So meanwhile, it's about 2 a.m. at this point. The Peace Society arrived at Wayland's Corners, and this is where John Jr. lived. These guys went and surrounded the house, and at this time, they decided to try to get Will Donnelly out, who also lived with his brother and his wife at that location. So they started calling him. But they were far away, so nobody woke up. So instead of storming the home this time, they decided to beat Will's prize horse to lure him out of the house. But the problem was the barn was just too far away for anyone to hear any of this. So spoiler alert for everybody, the horse actually survives. He's not decapitated like the dog. So one of the guys decided to get his courage up, and he went up to the porch and he started calling for Will while he was carrying a shotgun to the side door of the house. So Will Donnelly, he woke up, heard somebody calling him, but it was actually John Jr. that opened the door to look. As soon as he did, he received gunshots to his chest and groin, which damaged his chest, his lung and collarbone, his ribs. He collapsed, and he was shot 7 more times for punishment for his alleged actions against the community.
Oh, jeez.
Now, meanwhile, he's obviously dead on the porch. Will Donnelly's wife, Nora, she heard all of this, and she tried her best to try to get John Jr. because she thought she might be safe, trying to pull him to safety, but she couldn't move the body on her own. It was just dead weight. Meanwhile, Will was hiding inside a bedroom, and he went up to the window to peek outside to see who was attacking his house. And at this point, he saw the Peace Society, but he noticed one of those guys was Nora's own brother. So it was his brother-in-law that was actually killing people and killed his brother. So now the Peace Society, a lot of times passed, and they're kind of sobering up. They're worn out from all the murdering. So they said, you know what? Let's just go and survey the perimeter until somebody comes outside. We'll wait it out. But 3 hours later, after they're getting sober and nobody came out, they decided to leave. So the next day, Johnny, Will, and Nora decided to go report this attack and the murders to the local magistrate. Now, even though reports say that over 35 men participated in these murders, it was only Constable Carroll, and 5 other men from the Peace Society that were arrested for it. So it went for trial. And one of the key witnesses was, you guys would probably guess, Johnny O'Connor, because he was the only survivor, right?
Yeah.
Now, these vigilantes did everything they could to prevent this kid from testifying, including burning down his parents' house and threatening to kill his family. So Will also testified at this court case, and he also suffered just as much retaliation as the Johnny O'Connor's family did. But the defense witnesses, they were all the friends and families of the people who did the crimes.
Yeah.
These guys backed all of the alibis for every single person on trial. Now, due to this, the first trial was a hung jury, with one juror actually saying to the press he would not convict any of them, even if he witnessed the murders himself personally. Now, I'm thinking he had a little bit of bias, don't you?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, then they had the second trial. At the second trial, the judge gave instructions to the jury that they couldn't listen to Johnny's testimony at all. Do you know why?
I am guessing that there's another link in there somewhere.
Well, that's because Johnny's mother went to the court and asked to be paid for his testimony. After all, they've had no house anymore.
Oh, right. Yeah. And they kind of need a house.
Yeah. So can you just pay my kid? And so the judge was like, nope, that's biased. They're just testifying for money now. So you can't listen to that. Now, due to he was pulled out of the equation, Constable Carroll and the 5 men were determined to be not guilty. And when this was announced, the community held a party that literally lasted a full day and night.
Oh, geez.
They celebrated. Now, the thing is, the story about the Black Donnellys is now a very well piece, as I mentioned, of Canadian folklore.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know if you looked into this when you looked into this topic. A lot of the inhabitants of this township has been trying to suppress this subject for years. Since if you think about it, the residents who are there, they all had ancestors directly involved in the murder somehow. It's a small area.
Oh, yeah.
So I would make sense. It makes sense why people tried to put a little cover on it. But in the last, say, 10 or so years, businesses started to center up on this tragedy. Songs, books were written, and in 2007, NBC released a TV series called The Black Donnellys based on this story. And in 2017, a short film was also released about the events. And they've also opened up the Donnelly homestead. You can take tours there. And during these tours, people do say a lot of supernatural events happen. Now, the thing at the Donnelly homestead, they say things go missing often, which is very common with hauntings.
Yep. And
found later in unexplainable places. They claim that doors slam by themselves. People hear footsteps from unseen sources, and a lot of people report being touched by unseen hands. Individuals also claim that they hear voices talking in the middle of the night, and they hear screams coming from the barn. People also claim that they feel that they're being watched from the barn by unseen eyes. So why do you think the barn?
From my understanding, the barn is the only structure left that's actually original to the time frame.
You are 100% correct. It's because the barn is original to the property.
Yeah.
Now, on top of it, there is plenty of stories about sightings of shadow people and ghostly figures throughout this property. Now, the people who purchased the property after the deaths, they did call in a local priest to bless the property and to give the Donnelly family their last rites. Because that's why they were thinking maybe they had so much activity. These people never got that.
Right.
And so they did. And even though they did that, even so, the ghostly activity is still said to be extremely active to this today. Now, in addition to this, the road that the vigilantes walk down is also said to be supposedly haunted. They claim, and this is where the legend piece comes in, that horses will not go down the road the night of February 3rd. And if they do, the horses will die soon afterwards. They also claim that horses will not walk on the Donnelly property at all. Now, in case there isn't enough little stories about that, people also report seeing headless horses galloping throughout the township, and they claim that living horses throughout the township go berserk on a regular basis for reasons unknown. Now, my thought is maybe that's revenge for the Peace Society beating Will's prize horse. Not really sure.
Yeah. that's an interesting one because I saw that a lot too. Is February 3rd and February 4th. Any horses on Roman Line Road would just stop and they wouldn't go towards the property. And maybe it's a residual issue with the horse showing up during that time frame, and they're like, that's weird. Like there's another horse here that's just kind of hanging out. It's a very interesting theory, but you got to figure there's so much like that property had to absorb the hatred and the violence that happened that I would honestly wouldn't be surprised if horses at all wouldn't want to go there.
Or animals in general.
Yeah.
And that when I heard that, because of like headless horses and all this stuff, it sounds a little absurd. But if you think about it, it does make sense that a horse or any sort of animal would maybe sense something and not go there.
Exactly.
Now, also, I believe that sometimes that there's something that happens that's so severe and so bad, it absolutely stains that land. So I do believe personally that there's a lot of the hauntings very much could be just a loop or residual.
Yep.
Where I also believe that there very much so is probably intelligent hauntings there too.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's both. I mean, especially if stuff's missing, right? If something comes, it's there and then missing and then shows up in a different spot, that would definitely correlate to something would be in an intelligent haunting of that nature. The animals, that could be just residual. It's hard to say.
I also think too that part of the reason why it's saying that the whole area has hauntings. If you think about it, they didn't just murder in one location.
No, exactly. They murdered a couple different locations on that property.
Right.
I think the funny part about the whole story is that all of this stuff was carried out by the Peace Society.
Exactly. The irony of being called vigilante and then their vigilantes are joining a peace society is very ironic.
Yeah. The one thing I did find, because I looked through several of the documents, reportings, when O'Connor was talking about and giving a testimony of who was leading the charge, it was the priest.
Exactly. And that's the thing that you pull from very second one is when he started preaching against people in his own community. That priest was absolutely inciting hatred when he's like saying it. Like, can you imagine that even happening today? If you go to a church service and a minister just starts preaching about how evil other people of other denominations are and saying, hey, we've had some crimes here. I'm pretty sure that guy did it.
And on top of that, let's go and I will lead the way to that person's house at 2:00 in the morning so we can go arrest them.
to just, put him on a noose around their neck and hang him from the tree just to scare him.
Just lightly.
If to me, of the worst villain in the story is Constable Connor and the priest.
Yeah. The people, the part that is like ironic about it is those are the two people of this entire group that should have known better.
Yeah. They're the ones supposed to be promoting peace, in the name Peace Society. They were the ones that were supposed to be trying to quell all of this bad behavior. They were the ones that were responsible to making, have everybody play nice. And they were the ones leading the charge.
Yeah.
Like the Donnelly family didn't have a chance. And as I mentioned earlier, both everybody there was doing bad stuff. But obviously, from the minister all the way down to the Donnellys, everyone did something they really shouldn't have done. But with that said, it should never result in a death, trying to wipe out an entire family.
No, exactly. Like if you're trying to get like the key players in it, the adults in it, like the men in it, then why are you killing the women associated to it?
Correct.
And then,
why are you beating horses? Why are you cutting heads off dogs?
Right. Exactly. But the interesting thing is, I found some reports of the paranormal activity not starting, or starting actually at the wake.
Mm-hmm.
So at the Donnelly's wake, which was held on the O'Connor's farmhouse, there was reportedly heard wails and sobs and like drawn out and eerie floating from the distance, like just kind of like coming around and, floating over the snow covered fields. And like most of the people who were at the farmhouse during the wake heard these moans and sobs.
Right. And with me, that makes sense. Again, the family died in extremely violent ways.
Horrible.
When I heard basically that from the second they died, hauntings appeared. And it makes sense because, again, not only did they die in a very fast and violent way, like it literally was a shock to the system. And if you look at like why people, where a spirit comes out, a lot of times it's based on emotion, whatever emotion that you were dealing with at the time that you passed. For example, like if, that's why you'll have people, if they're mourning their children, you'll see white ladies appear, for example. And I think that this is another example of this. The violence was so severe and it was really such a shock. If it was me, I would probably haunt the place too.
Yeah, exactly. There's an interesting part though, too, because it shows that like there was, or at least the reports of like, of the men that were in this vigilante group, some of them died in inexplicable ways. It's almost like a curse was dropped on them. So one of the men, more than a decade after his massacre, is said to his groaning and writhing while he was dying because he was gored by a bull. And he says it was her last words, the awful curse of Johanna, that brought this upon me.
And that is something I've read too. And that's what I've always wondered is why are they thinking that Joanna is like leading the family charge of ghosts? You know what I mean? Now, I also believe, like, what is your thoughts on curse? Like with myself, I believe that, for example, if you're told that you're cursed, you're going to think you're cursed. And it's almost like manifesting your own worst situation, right?
Yeah.
Now, do you feel that these people believe that they had any remorse? And that is why he said what he did and he felt he was cursed? Or do you think that there could have been a legitimate curse?
I think it's both. I think there's a two-factor part to it, right? I think he feels like he was cursed because there's, bad stuff was happening after the fact of the committing these things. And I think that gave him remorse in that avenue. Like taking the life of an individual is for lack of a better term, a life-changing event and one that's always going to stick with you. And so if you've done it out of malice and hatred in those things, unless you are a psychopath and have no remorse whatsoever, you're going to feel it. And in this case, it was decades after the fact. Also in that same course, who says that she wasn't haunting them?
Exactly. And I always found it was very interesting that they would say Joanna, because again, what was Joanna's crime in this? What was Bridget's crime in this? Nothing really, other than Joanna had children. That's it. And I can completely see how a person could be whipped up in a froth by everybody else in the community. And when they went in there, like you do see example after example of, like mob mentality. And I think that that's what happened that night. It was a lot of mob mentality. And then when it was over with, everybody was like, uh-oh. And I think with time, except for example, the guy you said, you would have guilt if you weren't a sociopath, especially when it came to the females in this story.
Yes.
Reality is Joanna didn't do anything wrong and neither did Bridget. Bridget just showed up. She was helping her family. And I think that very much could, if you take any life for any reason, it does draw on a person. And so I agree with you. I think that for lack of better terms, the curse is cursing yourself in guilt. And the other curse is absolutely Joanna might be popping in there and saying, dude, you killed my family. I'm going to haunt you a bit. I think it could be very much both.
Well, yeah. And like Joe McIntyre, he was one of the vigilantes. So Tom Donnelly was beheaded during this whole event. Well, Joe McIntyre was the one that did it. He actually confessed to doing it. He says, my life has been a living hell on earth for me. And I've seen Joanna 1,000 times in my dreams. She points an accusatory finger at me and gives me a terrible smile. She comes in the night to haunt me and I can't go on much longer. After giving this, 2 weeks later, he hung himself in his barn. Yeah.
So was it she was haunting or was he haunting himself, for lack of better terms? I do agree that it very possibly could be both. Again, Joanna was an innocent person here. Her whole family got wiped out in a horrible way. She watched her niece get murdered. Her husband get murdered, her son. If I were a mom, I'd come back and make those guys pay a bit.
Right. Exactly.
I can't blame her.
No. And that's the thing is like, yeah, it's like, it's probably both. And that there's the guilt, right? That he's, has the guilt upon him from these pieces. But in the same token, yeah, I'm sure she's sitting around there going, you did this wrong and, you need to pay.
Yeah. And again, if you think about it, wasn't that how the Donnellys' attitude was in the rest of the communities anyway? That's why the feud happened. It was tit for tat.
Yeah, it was so tit for tat.
I would come back as a ghost and do my tit for tat with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because like you mentioned that there was a lot of retaliation, right? And there still is. Like I found a website and I was looking over the website and they had a section at the bottom of their website where somebody from the township wrote into the website and said, you guys have this wrong. You're making them seem like this average, normal, God-fearing group, and they weren't. And this is why. And it's like, I don't think anyone would say they're innocent in this avenue. But like, there was another incident happened where there was a package delivered and the Donnellys delivered the package. And when they're, to like, a mercantile. And when the guy picked up his package from the mercantile and saw that it was delivered by the Donnellys, he smashed it in the store. Like this is hatred beyond like normal levels of just being angry at somebody.
And that's the question I have whenever I tell this story. Why do you believe the hatred was so bad? I think for myself personally, I think it has a couple of reasons. I think that when you hear a lot of cases of this in Canada back then, is when the Irish immigrated over, they brought their feuds from Ireland with them. And I do believe that there was part of that. But I also think part of it was, I think they both went at each other. And I do believe that absolutely the squatting and then the murder that happened from that, well, it's self-defense, but that also just added to the scenario. And if you're being told all the time that you're a Black Donnelly and you're just bad for existing, I can understand why they would lash out.
Oh, exactly. This type of treatment we've had towards other, like it's almost this typical outsider treatment, right? You have an established community there, even though it's, really small at this time. And then you have another family move in and they start living there and potentially doing well. In this case of the stagecoach situation, they were, actually doing very well and starting to dominate. And because of that, right, it's now this mentality of you're taking our jobs, you're ruining our way of life. We must, destroy you in whichever way we can. And in the 1800s, when this was going on, even in the States, this was never a polite or war of words. It was always some form of violence or like mischief that would go on.
But if you think about it too, that also was the times that they lived in.
Yes.
Like the area of Biddulph was considered to be like a Wild West, location, like a town, with the shootouts and all that. It was a different time. So when people hear this story today, it sounds insane, but it was absolutely a different time. And that was a time that people didn't think they were getting proper justice. The law was the criminals most of the time. And then you have the person in your community that you're supposed to look up to as a person of perfection when it comes to ethics. And he's preaching hate.
Yeah, exactly. And when you preach hate, it just breeds hate. And it just cycles out of control.
It swirls from there.
Yeah.
And I think that is really what the cause of all this was. It wasn't just like a Hatfield and McCoy grudge match sort of thing. It was really instigated by other people who were supposed to be the leaders of the community.
Right. When you have the constable and a religious leader involved, it's like I said, those are the two people that should know better. And if they're leading the charge, that's problematic. But in a way, if it is the Wild West, right, at least one of them, the constable, was involved in other issues, right? They were probably leading their own little vigilante gang, doing their own things. And of course, people were mad that justice wasn't getting served because who do you think's also on involved, if the constable's involved, the judge is involved.
Right.
And no, they're not going to get any justice. What's interesting is there's a town in Montana called Bannock, and they had a similar situation where they had a constable who was the leader of a vigilante group. Well, the townspeople, they got fed up. They hung that vigilante leader. They hung their own constable to get rid of this issue. And this might have been a similar solution for the poor people of this town.
Right. But the thing is, if you have, it's almost like you're watching like a movie, a criminal movie on TV, where you have the big mastermind and you're trying to figure out who's the mastermind of all the evil. And it always is somebody like the mayor or the cop. I was actually on Netflix, or not Netflix, but on Amazon Prime. I was watching The Mentalist. A TV show. And I finally got to the end where the bad guy all along was a cop. Yeah. But if you look at it, there's certain trades or careers or whatever that you people just have a blind trust in, like a minister or a police officer. These people are expected to have a very high morality and carry themselves differently within a community. But that's not what we had in this story. We had these guys that being basically spearheading the hate. So it makes a lot of logical sense that the community would get ramped up in that way against the Donnellys. But again, the Donnellys didn't help themselves because they sounded like a scrapping sort of bunch that they're going to fight back. And would this situation be completely different if they weren't that? We don't know.
Right. We're not going to know. I mean, the thing is like the immigrants who immigrated to the New World, right, to either Canada or the U.S., like they had to be a scrappy bunch because they were fleeing poverty,
right?
Adverse poverty, in coming to the U.S. And well, you have nothing. You come to the U.S., you still have nothing, and now you have to find a way to get something. And the only way you're going to do it is by working your tail off and being a little bit scrappy. And it happened, right? Like there were a lot of gangs in New York that were, Irish born. These types of things happen because you have to do what you got to do to survive. And if you have a bunch of other people who are anti, Irish in some cases, you're going to have to fight back. Was this a case of that? I don't think so. I think there were a lot more Irish people living in that area. And it just seemed like the Donnelly family was the perfect scapegoat.
Yeah. And if you look at it with today's lens of what the Donnellys allegedly did, of course they did some bad stuff. Everybody was doing bad stuff. I'm painting everyone with the same brush. But in a way, I see Donnellys ahead of their times because when they went to church and they heard the minister preaching against other religions and trying to make them look worse, that they're beneath you, all that stuff. Back then, people didn't speak up.
No.
But today times, absolutely. If you were in a church and that preacher started going and trashing other people, different race, different religion, what have you, today, absolutely, a person would stand up and denounce that priest in the church. Absolutely, you would have people going and giving to charities that support the victims that he's targeted. And so, in a way, the Donnellys were ahead of their times by doing this, which back then, that was a bad idea.
Yeah, you're bucking the flow. You're going against everybody else, and now you're going to pay. And yeah, and I think the rumor mill, and let's face it, the rumor mill today is still alive and well, right? We just
absolutely
now we call it the internet.
But you got to understand too, a lot of the people that are in the Biddulph area are the descendants of the people who did the killings.
Yes.
So it makes sense that they're going to want to go and present their side as the Black Donnellys were evil and our guys just did what they had to do. But then you have others that are from the outside of that area looking in and saying, oh, you guys went too far.
Yeah. And the thing that I find interesting is they still call this like the greatest, Canadian murder mystery that hasn't been solved. It's like, no one has come to justice for it. But
yes, we all know who did it.
Yeah. There was an eyewitness. Like in most cases, even back in the 1800s, if you had an eyewitness, even if they weren't credible, but, or not honest, if even they weren't honest, most of the time that would get you a conviction. 90+% of the time, if you had someone that set up and said, I saw this happen, this person pulled a gun and shot this guy dead, it's going to happen. You're going to get a conviction because they didn't have much else.
But it's very clear that the bias was in both juries. Again, like the one guy basically saying, hey, I don't care if he murdered them right in front of me. I still would say he's innocent. That shows you that the Donnellys didn't even have a chance in court to get justice for what happened to them. It never was going to happen.
No. And that's why, like today, right, we call it like we move trials away to get a fair trial. They had, unless they would have moved that to like Ontario or Ottawa, like moved it out of that area or to London or something, nearby. They weren't going to get it. There was no chance of a fair trial having it in the township.
Again, who was in the courts putting that trial on? It's all the, it's people from the community that's already been influenced.
Yeah, exactly.
And for them to have a party for a full day and night after, like the Donnellys, that is like the biggest FU I think ever. Really.
Oh yeah.
But on the same thing, it really does show that these guys had intent and they did what they did and they had zero remorse. So that's why, I'll be honest, it made me happy to discover that those guys who actually did the murders didn't have a great life afterwards. No. That maybe Joanna was going there and saying, look, you took my family away and I'm going to haunt you till the day you die.
Exactly.
And I think that if there is hauntings, that is a very primary reason to have the haunting is there was no justice.
Yeah.
These people were murdered and there's literally no justice. And instead, what they got is the town had a party. They had a kegger.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's no doubt. I mean, there's no doubt that there would be a reason for it. And other than the fact that this family was brutally murdered and then the house was burned to essentially cover up the murders or even just to add more insult to injury, honestly. But what's neat is the fact that the Saltz family, who owns the property today, actually allows tours on the property. And from my understanding, they will allow you to investigate and to do this at night. The only thing that I think everybody asks in this avenue is please contact the owners of the property before stepping foot on it, like get permission to go there. You don't, if you're not from Canada, you don't want to get arrested in Canada. But in the same token, those who are following the paranormal, like there should be a level of like, don't trespass, don't be, don't ruin it for everybody else.
Right. And the thing is, this family is very generous in letting people come in to investigate in respectful ways, respectful to their property and the Donnellys both.
Yes.
And that's one thing that I love about the fact is how they basically are very insistent and they tried to do the right thing for the Donnellys by having the house blessed, having final rites done. So again, and if this goes with any investigation, guys, do not trespass, always ask permission. And again, because let's just imagine for a moment that you just trespassed and all this is shut down, that nobody else can go on the property. Then nobody's going to get answers because of one guy who's decided to be a jerk.
Exactly.
So don't be that jerk. Ask permission.
Exactly. Where can they find you?
Well, Horrifying History is on any major podcast provider, but if you're looking for me personally, I'm in my basement. And we're actually, you can find us also on social media, on Instagram at horrifying_history, Twitter, horrifying HIST1. We're also on Facebook at Horrifying History. But starting May 1, we're having a new website where you can get all of that in one spot. And you're going to find that at Horrifying History. It's horrifying-history-store at fourthwall.com or .fourthwall.com.
Nice. I'll definitely have to check that out. So,
oh yes, you get our videos there too. We got brand new merch. You can go link to our social media and our new blog. One-stop shop, Horrifying History.
That's awesome. I just want to say thanks again for coming on and joining us for this amazing story, one that I hadn't heard of until we even talked about it. So thank you so much. To our listeners, thank you for listening in, and please, like and subscribe. And as always, stay ghosty, my peeps.
Welcome to Creepy Tapas. the show where two spooky best friends give you tiny tastes of terror connected by a common ingredient.
We serve up movie reviews, mysteries, murder, mayhem, and tantalizing tales from the depths of the internet, and some random bullshit too, all focused around a similar theme.
We blend our love of horror, oddities, and general creepiness and dig a little deeper, discovering the history, psychology, and truth behind your wildest fears.
Join us, Ash and Jordan, as we descend into full darkness every Sunday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's Creepy Tapas, y'all.
What?
Proud members of the Darkcast Network.
Thank you for listening to the Paranormal Peeps podcast. You can find us on social media at Twitter at CPR Paranormal, on Facebook at Paranormal Peeps Podcast and Cold Spot Paranormal Research. And you can find us on Instagram at coldspot_paranormal_research.